Tanmanjit Singh Dutt.
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker. For months, the Labour Party has been calling on the Prime Minister to get a grip of the crisis, yet characteristic of his government, all we have seen is dither and delay U-turn after U-turn and a failure to provide an effective testing and tracing of this deadly virus. Back in February, when the World Health Organization advised nations that a key component for their pandemic response should be test, test, test. But despite spending over £12 billion of taxpayers' money, forget the Prime Minister's self-avowed world-beating system, this government has failed spectacularly to deliver even a functioning test and trace system. Instead, they have blamed the public for wanting too many tests, misplaced records for 16,000 positive cases, and launched their app months late. And whilst ministers continue to bore us ad nauseum with their sound bites about world-beating capacity, they ignore the reality that the system is broken and, in the words of Sage, is having only a marginal impact on controlling the virus. Yet they continue to hand over billions of pounds of taxpayer money to private companies, many with Conservative Party connections, trying to paper over the cracks without addressing the failures of a privatised and centralised model. Just last week, only 68% of contacts of those who were tested positive for coronavirus were reached by the government central system, the worst weekly figure since test and trace began, whilst cases are amongst the highest. In comparison, Madam Deputy Speaker, 97.1% were reached by local protection teams. I think the picture is pretty clear. In my Slough constituency, because of government failures, the council were compelled to set up their own tracing system to protect our local community. This comes after the Department for Health and Social Care significantly curtailed the working of our local testing centre, causing absolute chaos. Constituents contacted me after being directed to drive hundreds of miles or even having to catch a ferry to the Isle of Wight just to get a test. Parents unable to send their children to school after waiting an entire week for test results, or key workers simply unable to book test appointments. One of my own staff, a key worker helping me provide support to the more than 1,400 constituents currently requiring my assistance, had to self-isolate for 2 weeks. That's because one of her relatives at home was taken to hospital by ambulance with a high temperature and struggling to breathe. But no test was offered either to my colleague or her relative. Instead, they were instructed to self-isolate for 2 weeks. It's just not good enough. Without effective and timely testing, contact tracing is rendered useless, and this is part of a pattern. Local councils have been failed at every turn, diminished national testing capacity, no blanket additional support to set up local track and trace systems, and only limited financial support. And all this after a decade of austerity which has stripped to the bone the public services, the much valued public services. How can they effectively respond without adequate government support? And whenever the likes of me ask basic questions of serious concern to our anxious constituents, the Health and Social Care Secretary decides to gaslight or even wag his finger around, accusing us of using divisive language. So, given that he doesn't seem to know the answer, perhaps the Minister can advise us and advise the good people of Slough. When will our test centre in Slough go back to being a drive-through and walk-in facility so that locals can actually access a test when they desperately need one? Madam Deputy Speaker, the British people want to do the right thing, get tested and follow government advice, but they are being badly let down by a government whose dithering and incompetence has resulted in our Slough sadly now having the largest unemployment increase in the whole of the UK since the start of this outbreak. It's incredible that while some nations prioritised their public health and others their economy, this Conservative government has managed to ineptly sacrifice both. Thank you.